Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this month's Acting for Justice event. My name is Jack Jezreel. I serve on the staff of Just Faith Ministries, and I'm joined by my colleague, Leela Oakley. We're just delighted you could join us tonight. So let's begin our program this evening with prayer. Our prayer tonight reminds me of the words of the great mystic Meister Eckhart, who once wrote, "If the only prayer that ever uttered from our lips was thank you, that would be enough." Tonight's prayer by the Reverend Howard Thurman, another great mystic, is excerpted from a prayer entitled simply enough, A Prayer of Thanksgiving. Let us pray. Today, I make my sacrament of thanksgiving. I begin with the simple things of my days: fresh air to breathe, cool water to drink, the taste of food, the protection of houses and clothes, the comforts of home. For all these, I make an act of thanksgiving this day. I bring to mind all the warmth of humankind that I have known, my mother's arms, the strength of my father, the playmates of my childhood, the wonderful stories brought to me from the lives of many who talked of days gone by when fairies and giants and all kinds of magic held sway, the tears I have shed, the tears I have seen, the excitement of laughter and the twinkle in the eye with its reminder that life is good. For all these, I make an act of thanksgiving this day. I pass before me the mainsprings of my heritage, the fruits of labors of countless generations who lived before me, without whom my own life would have no meaning. The seers who saw visions and dreamed dreams, the prophets who sensed a truth greater than the mind could grasp and whose words would only find fulfillment in the years which they would never see. The workers whose sweat has watered the trees, the leaves of which are the healing of the nations. The pilgrims who set their sails for lands beyond all horizons, whose courage made paths into new worlds and far-off places. The saviors whose blood was shed with a recklessness that only a dream could inspire and God could command. For all this, I make an act of thanksgiving this day. I linger over the meaning of my own life and the commitment to which I give the loyalty of my heart and mind, the little purposes in which I have shared my loves, my desires, my gifts, the restlessness which bottoms all I do with its stark insistence that I have never done my best, I have never dared to reach for the highest, the big hope that never quite deserts me, that I and my kind will study war no more, that love and tenderness and all the inner graces of almighty affection will cover the life of the children of God as the waters cover the sea. All these and more than mind can think and heart can feel, I make as my sacrament of thanksgiving to thee, O God, in humbleness of mind and simplicity of heart. Amen. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce you to tonight's presenter. This bio is not the longest for sure, but it is the most poetic. Tom Schneider is a chemist and a student of creation. Tom was born and raised in Oregon. He was born and raised in the church. He was born and raised in a family. Tom describes himself as a servant of the universe, developing new technologies to help save energy and to make sandwiches for the hungry while constantly seeking truth. You will find him in the lab or in the mountains, amazed at creation and our role in it. Looking for his heritage, he writes, he went back far enough to see that we are all one. Tom, welcome, and the mic is yours.
Thank you so much for that intro, Jack. I appreciate that. It is truly an honor to get to share some of these thoughts that we've strung together. And I can say that I'm here to make all your dreams come true. All that is required of you is to lower your expectations, and we'll all be happy. I typically speak to groups about energy conservation and building science and sealants and coatings technology to stop some of the wasted energy we use to heat and cool our homes and make environments for children a little bit better on their lungs. But tonight's presentation is a gift to me. It is the result of time spent with a mentor that I've been blessed to be introduced to and come to know and love over the last 8 years. He is a elder of the Turtle Mountain tribe of Ojibwe Indians in Turtle Mountain in Dunseith, North Dakota. It turns out he is family. His family is my family. He's introduced me to family. He's introduced me to some ancient stories, ancient prayers, ancient songs, ancient rituals and ceremonies. And he is sitting, I'm very happy to be joined by him this evening. He's right here next to me. And I can feel his power and love that we'll all benefit from this evening. And some of his other friends are on here joining with us tonight as well from the Baha'i faith. As Jack mentioned, this has been a journey partly to find my own heritage, find out the basis of my family and where they came from and why I'm who I am. And as Jack mentioned, part of that search has led me to believe that if we go back far enough, it was just you and me. There was two of us there. And all that we see today is the result of that. And that makes it easier for me to see everybody as family. Some of the accounts of our history of the Ojibwe tribe explain how they adapted to change, and that being how they survived. Many tribes and native peoples are extinct because either the time or the situation didn't allow for them to adapt. And part of that adaptation process for the Ojibwe nation was to intermarry and become family with those that were overtaking the land and the place that they had known all of their lives. And as I read through some of the accounts of the historians and people that were from Europe as either military leaders or industry leaders in the fur trade or religious leaders, they recognized that the Ojibwe men were apt to offer their wives. And oftentimes they had more than one wife, not in the context that we look at wives, but it might be their sisters, their brothers, widows, or widows in the community. And they might be, because they were under their care, they might be considered their wives. And in several of the accounts that I've read about, they were asked, the tribal leaders or chiefs or prominent men in the community were asked why that was the case. Why did they offer their wives? And they responded, at least in 3 separate accounts that I read about, they recognized that the children of those unions were more likely to survive childbirth, and they were more likely to be stronger warriors. Warriors, not in the sense of killing each other, And it was a term that was used to describe the men that fought. And those enemies weren't always other tribes. It just might mean an enemy that came upon the people. Like we look at today, the COVID was an enemy, and we needed warriors to survive it. We have racism, and we need warriors to survive it. And they recognize that intermarriage and diversity made them stronger as a nation. And some of the other things that I've learned about the tribe and the tribe's history were these ceremonies. And Max Defender, sitting next to me, is what might be considered a chief of some of those ceremonies. And as I was introduced to them and invited to participate in them, I recognized some pagan traditions and some songs and some costumes and some paraphernalia, similar to what I grew up with in the Catholic Church. A lot of different smells, a lot of different robes, a lot of different prayers, a lot of different songs. But what I recognized common amongst all these ceremonies was that at some point during the event, everybody, each individual that attended, was invited to speak. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, but that notion of everybody getting to have a voice. Nobody else argues, nobody responds. They are handed a stick or a feather or a rock or something to designate them as the speaker. And as each person speaks, we all become familiar with each other's voices. We all become familiar with each other's joys, with each other's sorrows, with each other's prayers, with each other's concerns. And even if you were only to attend that one time, you were a member of that community during that time. And as a member of the community, we're empowered to do things that we cannot do on our own. And later, years later, after I start discovering things, a whole bunch of strings start coming together from my past, from my experience in Catholic church, Catholic school, and then teaching Sunday school to children and young adults for several decades. A lot of these strings started coming together and pointing to the same direction. Tonight's topics, as I was asked to discuss, are equality, ecology, and unity. And I recognize those are very nebulous terms that people get passionate about. Typically, everybody has something to say about them. They're very poorly defined. And oftentimes we use those words as lip service to feel better about our groups. We can devote half an hour or a day to our schedule to learn about it. We'll invite speakers to come and talk about it. And then we can say we're more aware of those terms or concepts. And hopefully we learn something about it, but without any real definition and without any idea of what it would look like if we succeeded in that, we have poorly defined goals about what that would look like in our community. And I think that that is partly the plan, because those words and what they represent, for them to become alive in our lives, in our families, our households, and in our community, would require change. And I don't like it when anybody moves my cheese. And I don't like it when somebody suggests my cheese needs to be moved. And I have an inherent need for things to remain the same. And that keeps these words and those concepts from really becoming alive. It's my reluctance to change. It isn't anybody else's reluctance to change, it's mine, because I can make those things alive in my life, in my family, in my workplace, in my community, by things I do. And it's so much easier to wait for legislation, wait for laws, wait for policy, wait for agreements that never come. I'll begin a little bit this with a story, something I witnessed many years ago, back when I was riding a bicycle thousands of miles every year, both for exercise and to commute. But I was traveling in my car to an intersection, and I see a man on a bicycle go by, and I recognized that bicycle. It was a handmade Italian Tomasini racing bike. And even at the time, that bike probably sold for $5,000 or $6,000. And there was very few of them around. You really had to be a serious cyclist before you would even know what that bike was. And I watched him go up the sidewalk and into a parking lot of a gas station that had a mini mart. And as he come up into the parking lot, he swung his right leg over the back tire and stepped off the bike as it was still rolling. And it kept going and crashed into a fence, fell over on its side on the pavement. And I knew in an instant he stole that bike. There wasn't any doubt that he did not save up the money and pay for it. He didn't gather the materials and weld and bolt and shine up the parts himself. And he certainly didn't make it out of his own flesh and blood. He stole that bike. And that's what allowed him to mistreat it. That's what allowed him to disrespect it. It met his immediate need, and it got him to the store, but he didn't lock it up. He wasn't relying on it to get home. He just needed it right away. And those needs were met. Just like a stolen car, you're not going to change the oil or rotate the tires or continue the maintenance. And there it might, and it did for me, answer the question to why we seem so comfortable with polluting our rivers, our water, polluting our air, our own air that we breathe, our own water that we ingest, and our own dirt. The dirt that all life comes from, the dirt that we come from. Here in America, a lot of the attitudes we have about the environment are based on the notion that we stole this land. It wasn't paid for, it wasn't bought, it wasn't fought for, it wasn't traded, it wasn't negotiated, it was stolen. And until we find a way to take ownership of it and feel that it, if not our own, certainly our responsibility to take care of, very little will change. Something's missing. Something's missing in the long term about our future needs. If we're concerned about our future needs, we might be more careful about putting the things in our water, into our air, and into the dirt. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like for each of us. I'm not sure that legislation can be written. I'm not sure that laws will ever develop that'll change our attitudes about that. But if I leave myself open to change, I have every confidence that we'll get there. In a process of seeking the truth, those words equality, ecology, and unity are results of, and certainly wrapped in, what is the truth. In 1610, a man named Galileo had perfected a telescope. And that year, he went outside at night and pointed it to the heavens. For the first time, a man had ever done that. And he found some truth. He found a truth that moved the entire humanity out of the center of the universe. He moved all of humanity out into not the center of the universe, but in the closet of one of the back bedrooms somewhere. Not everybody believed him when he was describing what he saw. He saw planets very similar to ours, circling around the sun that is in our center, or at least the center of our solar system, which is circling around a galaxy that we call the Milky Way. And that Milky Way is circling around a cluster of galaxies. And all those are circling around the center of what we call the Big Bang. And those truths that Galileo found by pointing that telescope to the sky moved us forward. It allowed us to go to the moon. It allowed us to very recently land a rocket ship on a piece of rock that we cannot see, we cannot hear, we cannot smell, we cannot taste, and we could not feel. It is outside of all of our senses, but yet we know enough from what Galileo found looking in that telescope to send a rocket millions and hundreds of millions of miles away, clear beyond the other side of the sun, knowing where it's going to be 3 years from now when it gets there, and then meet up with it and land on it and send pictures back from it. So it was what people might consider a miracle, what Galileo found in that telescope. And it certainly provided jobs and excitement and activities for humanity to occupy themselves with for the last several hundred years. Shortly after he did that, somebody else took that telescope and turned it around looked through the other end at the dirt, looking not for bigger and bigger and bigger things, but smaller and smaller and smaller things. People got very excited when they started reporting what they're seeing from what they no longer called a telescope, they call it a microscope. And it was finding out the building blocks of all things. It found that there's molecules that are building blocks or contraptions made of atoms of elements. And we found smaller and smaller and smaller particles to where we found the atoms of individual elements. And then we found the individual components of the atoms. And then we started smashing the atoms apart to see what they were made of. And a lot of people were looking for what they call the God particle. They were looking for what makes us alive, what makes us human. And after years and years of smashing particles and looking at smaller and smaller materials, they discovered that life is not a particle. It is a shape and a sequence. It's a double-stranded spiraling helix made of acids and protein, and we call it DNA. They found that is life. Everything that's alive has a set of instructions in it that make the cells, that make other cells, that reproduce themselves, that make all life in the universe. Whether it's a salamander or a fairy princess or myself or you, we all carry those instructions, that DNA. And as it turns out, looking at that DNA, we find that it's the truth. The DNA that exists on the earth today is the result of, from the very first cell that reproduced itself to what we see when we look out the window today. And it only contains the truth. All non-truths, all fake things, all dishonest things went extinct. Less than 1% of all the living things will survive. 99% of all living things will not have descendants. 99% of all things will go extinct. And this is found in science. So all the things that survive include our grandfathers, our grandmothers. They did something. 7 generations, 20 generations, 50 generations back, they all had something in common. They adapted, they reproduced in the way of the truth. All the people that didn't follow that truth don't have grandsons, don't have granddaughters. They became extinct. And several people, and you've heard the term, survival of the fittest. And for a very long time, we thought that the DNA or the people that survived to bring us were the fittest. And that made us a lot of sense before we understood what that history looks like. And it still may be survival of the fittest, but we have to change the definition of fitness for that to remain true. It wasn't the strongest. It wasn't the people with the biggest muscles or the fastest swimmers or runners. If it was survival of the fittest, then the fittest were the people that lifted each other up. The fittest were the people that made sure there was a clean, healthy nest for the mothers and children. The fittest were the ones that saw hungry people and fed them. The fittest were the ones that encouraged others. The fittest were the ones that sacrificed their own personal, individual needs and desires and wants for what was best for the community. Reading or listening to today's news and papers and books, people profit from and are empowered by division. There's a lot of money being made when we're angry at each other, when we're arguing, yelling, not talking. And all of that will go extinct. And just the less than 1% that follow the truth actively seek, accept, and adapt to the truth, they will have descendants. Their DNA will survive. They're the people that you know. They're people that are shoulder to shoulder with you as you spend your own time seeking the truth. As I've noticed, while I'm seeking the truth, I find myself surrounded by similar people. And we gather like we are here tonight. We are each given a chance to speak. And we find the truth in others' voices, in other people's experiences, the stories of their sorrows, the stories of their joys. And it's been a beautiful thing to find out fresh and new as what I understand the truth to be, bound up in the history of ceremony of the people I came from. And that these ceremonies are not just a time to gather and sing songs and show off our outfits and our feathers and our cars that we drive to get there, but that we offer each other a voice by listening to them. That is what I believe equality is, where everybody gets a chance to say, where everybody gets a chance to be part of the plan for tomorrow. And that's something I can offer. I can listen. I can make a space. I can hold a space where people are allowed to decide what tomorrow's going to look like. Maybe we're not all going to be happy with it, but if we all feel like we have a say in it, that's equality. When we are the people that lift each other up, when we're the people that are sacrificing our own desires for those, for the community, when we're providing a garden where women and children thrive, the environment will be fine. That is ecology. When we respect the environment for what it is and recognize our future in it and treat it as such. When two or more people are discussing this or meeting to make it happen, I think that's unity. That's what unites us. When we are gathered for the better of the community, that unites us. It makes us one. That man on the bike who stole that bike was failed by his community. Somehow, somewhere in his life, he was not lifted up. The people in his community failed him. And until I see that, until I take responsibility for it, nothing will change. But that's something I can do. I can be open to change. I can lift others up. I can support others. I can feed others. They don't even have to be hungry. I can love others by feeding them. I can care about others by feeding them. That's something I can do. And when we're talking about doing that for each other or organizing food drives, that's uniting. And it's the definition of unity. Sometimes it's hard to look at that guy on the bike and find sympathy in my heart for him. To look at that guy on the bike and find compassion. Near impossible. One of these old ceremonies, one that I've never attended, I've never witnessed, I've only heard about from another elder from the Turtle Mountain Ojibwe tribe. It's called an eagle dance. And there was a lot of reasons that people might gather for that ceremony or that event. As most of the ceremonies were, it revolved around resurrection. There was a death and a resurrection depicted within the ceremony. And part of that ceremony included the eagle dancers taking an eagle feather, their own, each of them had a feather, and they dipped the tip of it into a cup of broth before they spoke. They would take that tip of the feather, put it to their tongue, and hold the feather in front of them when they spoke, focusing on the feather, and invited whoever was listening to look at the feather, not them. And it didn't really dawn on me until recently. I just was writing down notes as fast as I can. But I know now, or at least my interpretation or what I take away from that is I have to look at the feather. I have to look at the creation. I have to look at the creator. If I focus on the creator, I'll see it in the people. If I focus on the creator, I will not see the sinner. I will not see the destruction, the hate, the disrespect, the lack of love. I'll see the creator. And I wish I was better at it. I'm not. I'm not real good at it. I try to be, and I try for Friday. Tomorrow might be a little better than Thursday today. And maybe next week I'll be even just a tiny fraction better about it than this week. But just like I have this ring on my finger, it's been on there for 44 years. And it isn't to tell other women that I'm married and unavailable. It's there to remind me of that beautiful woman that I have shared most of my life with, and the two beautiful daughters that we have together. So every time the sun hits that ring, every time I'm holding a tool or lifting my hand for anything, I see that ring and I'm reminded to be grateful for that wife, that marriage, that wonderful thing that was gifted to me. And for the same reason, I carry a little bag, and it has items in it that are supposed to remind me why I should be grateful, why I should be honest, why I should be respectful, why I should be humble, why I should have courage, why I should be honest. I need to be reminded that within everybody is the essence of the creator. And once I recognize that, it makes it a whole lot easier, even for the guy that stole the bike. I'm responsible for him. I'm responsible for the nest that we're all in. And seeing the creator in him makes that an easier task. So those are the things I can do. If I respect the environment, if I respect the rest of the people, if I'm engaged in these activities, there is the ecology, there is the equality, and there is the unity. And again, I'm going to point to my mentor, who has helped make me aware of these things. Not because he teaches me out of a book, not because he says, Tom, here's what we're going to study tonight. I just noticed that after months and years of sitting and talking with him, I'm more aware of these things. And I am so grateful to have that mentor. And I do encourage each of you to find that mentor, somebody that speaks your language, somebody that you are comfortable with, somebody that you can find in your heart to love and share a life with. And if you can't find that mentor, be one. Because there's a whole bunch of the rest of us looking for a mentor. And as we say in our tribe, when we're done talking, aho. So it is. So now we'll turn it over to Layla, I suppose, who is going to put us into groups. I appreciate everybody's attention. Sorry for my rambling. That's what I have this evening.
Thanks. Thanks, Tom. As Tom just mentioned, we are going to break into small groups for just about 10 minutes. And Leela just posted some questions in the chat that we can talk together about Tom's presentation. So when we go into small groups, just may I suggest you introduce yourself and then pick one of the questions and offer some reflections, and give everybody a couple of minutes to respond. Join in, share some wisdom. We'll be back in 10 minutes with some Q&A time with Tom. So thank you, Tom, very much. Hey, we'd like to do something a little different tonight than what is our standard. Typically, we have people send questions to me, and then I sort of parse through them and then present them, give them to the presenter. But tonight, Leela's just going to open it up so that you can unmute yourself. And I thought we would just invite anybody who would like to ask a question or even make a comment, but to ask a question of Tom, just to unmute yourself and go at it. And let me just add, because we do have limited time, that you limit your comment or your question to about 30 seconds or so that everybody has an opportunity. So if anybody has a question or would like to make a comment, unmute yourself and take about 30 seconds.
I don't need to see you without your pants on video. Go get your pants on. Go get your pants on.
Please
would like
feel
to
free
ask-
to ask Max a question if you have one for him as well.
Okay, great. Carol, I see your hand.
I just wanted to know how you share this wisdom with your youth that you're surrounding as family and friends. This wisdom you shared with us, how are you bringing that to the younger generation?
By supporting others that are doing it. And I have a number of ways that I do that. There is a gentleman on here, because I recognize his background, who told me something several weeks ago, and I don't think he has any idea how profound it was for me as a teacher of youth. He recounted when he was a young boy hearing about the Baha'i faith. And he went to his tribal elder, who was Max's mentor, and asked him, "What's this Baha'i thing about?" And the elder left the room, came back with a small box full of books, and said, "Read these books and come back and tell me." Because that truth it's alive and it evolves. And I can't tell the youth what the truth is. They can tell me. I can refer to them to scriptures and history and stories, but they're the ones that will decide what that truth is and what it means. And that's, I guess, I wished I'd have learned that decades ago and incorporated that into my Sunday school teaching instead of telling them what the answer is, asking them what the answer is, because they're the ones to know. They will tell us.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Tom. Next question, somebody? Yes, I see Paul and Darylyn.
Okay, I unmuted us.
I just had a suggestion as a response to that last topic of discussion. My nest was empty before I found a book called The Virtues Project. And along with the book of Virtues Project comes decks of cards. So, and there are definitions as to what the virtues means. And I wish I would have had more of that available. I didn't find it till my nest was empty. But that, as a parent, that would have given me empowerment of a discussion to share with my children growing up and asking them to focus their lives on the virtues, which is a word that means the qualities in us for the potential, the reflection of how we're capable of
Reflecting God.
yeah, reflecting the virtues of our Creator and giving them opportunities to say the conflicts that they have come to in their lives. And I thank my mother that when I came to her with the conflicts of my life, she had a standard answer, and I had it memorized by the time I was in junior high. The answer is always, what would Jesus do?
Mhm.
And that's how I was raised. And then when I found the Virtues Project, I really recognized that I missed the boat of not having it available for raising my children. But then when my children were being raised, there was only one prayer book for children. Now there's numerous ones for them. So if that's a help to anybody else, I leave it out there as a suggestion.
Thank you very much. Anybody else, comment or question? Yes, Susan. You're on mute. Susan, you're on mute.
Either Tom or Max or both, knowing how popular and well-read Robin Wall Kimmerer's book is, that talks about the way the indigenous people took care of the land, and she herself is, I know that that's one of the books that are studied in Just Faith, in studying Laudato Si, is to look at it from that perspective also. Are you seeing, Tom, as you continue to do your work, the influence that her book, and now that she has one written for middle schoolers, how incredible. I wish I'd had that when I was teaching social studies.
You know, when you buy a new car, like I've never owned a Toyota 4Runner before, but as soon as I got one and started driving it, I see them everywhere. They're behind me, in front of me, and on both sides of me. And it's the same thing. That which we focus on, we're going to find, we're going to see a lot of.
I see. Okay.
That would be my response. Maybe I mush them. I call him mushum, as we call our grandfathers in our language, but I'll let him answer that as well. He's familiar with Kimmerer as an author as well.
I don't know what to say. I could be, well, a lot of the people all over the world, all of this has to boil down to disunity, and a lot of it has to do with prejudice, because of the fact that if we were all in unity, we would take care of all these things that we need to take care of. But means that we look down at, instead of like part of the talk was that to me was like, you have to look at everybody like you're looking at the creator. So everybody is equal, because in the eyes of the creator, we are all equal. None of us are above each other. None of us are below each other. A lot of this environmental stuff has to do with monetary things. And everything that we destroy, everything that's destroyed, there's a mystery in it for us, because we can find the mystery. So all these things that have passed, and all the things that are not yet destroyed or anything like that, they all have a mystery for us to find out. And there's something beneficial in all of that. All of the creatures, all of the plants, all of the animals, all the rocks, they all have a mystery that we could find out by our spiritual powers. Our spiritual powers are given to us to find out these things. All the different different medicines, all the different inventions, all the things that are moving us forward in this world. All them things. I just told one of them young guys, I said, if our ancestor had this social media, they would have used it. So long time. That's what I know about that.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's what I hear.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question or comment. Yes, Sally.
Yeah, I will be brief, but I'm doing research on water worldwide because of the book that Just Faith was read. I'm here in Wyoming, and Tom, I have a question for you or anyone else, but the water issue is huge and people are afraid to talk about it because, it's just controversial for the name. But what's difficult in Wyoming is that there's two tribes on one reservation, the Arapaho and Shoshone, and so everything kind of gets muddled, but I appreciate the clarity of your voice. And I know if you want to offer some kind of help for me here in Laramie, Wyoming.
I think that, again, these terms that we use and the efforts that we go through aren't well defined. And there are few goals of what, or definitions of what success would look like. If we define even a small goal, it'll make it a lot easier to achieve. But just to say we're going to clean the water up, it is an invitation to do nothing. If we say we're going to reduce the lead levels or reduce the sediments in the water or reduce the algae in the water by a given amount in a given time, that's something people can rally around. It's an achievable goal. And if it's too big a goal, cut it in half. Cut it in half until it looks like something we can do, publish it, and then everybody's willing to get on board. But I think it's just our objectives are too nebulous for the most part in the environmental industry. We're not clear, we're not concise, we don't have well-defined goals. And I think that limits the number of people that will be involved.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you all. Tom, I so appreciate you and Max being with us tonight. If I could invite those who have their screen on just to offer a silent clap and appreciation for your generosity of time and thought. We are so grateful for having you here tonight. Thank you. And before we close tonight, I wanted to just do the typical little Just Faith advertisement and recommend one of our programs for your consideration. The one I have in mind tonight is our newest program. It's entitled The Land Is Not Our Own, Seeking Repair Along Indigenous Communities, which inspires and equips people of faith to stand alongside Native communities in working for justice and repair. The program guides participants in discerning how Christian communities can address the extinction, the enslavement, the extraction done in the name of Christ on indigenous lands. It will help equip your group or congregation to seek justice and repair in solidarity with indigenous leaders. It celebrates the wisdom and traditions of indigenous authors and artists and spiritual teachers, and it can inspire daily decision-making that honors participants' sacred relationship with all of creation. Leela is putting a link to that program in the chat. If you'd like to click on it to learn more, please do. And finally, please join us for the next Acting for Justice event next month, featuring a presentation entitled Faith and Action in a Time of Climate Crisis by climate activist William Morris, whose work has been featured on ABC News and the BBC. So watch for the invitation to register and join us again next month. And now, if you will, I'd like to close with a prayer. This prayer comes from a collection that maybe some of you know called Earth Prayers. Let us pray. Hear, O humankind, the prayer of my heart. For are we not one? Have we not one desire? To heal our Mother Earth and bind her wounds, to hear again from dark forest and flashing rivers the varied, ever-changing song of creation. And life is the sacred mystery, singing to itself, dancing to its drum, telling tales, improvising, playing, and we are all that spirit, our stories all but one cosmic story, that we are love indeed. That perfect love in me seeks the love in you. And if our eyes could ever meet without fear, we would recognize each other and rejoice. For love is life, believing in itself. Amen. Thank you all for being with us tonight, and we'll hope you join us again next month. Take care, and thank you.